All rise. Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. We're here talking with our good friend, Matt and I are talking with our good friend today, Mr. Lou Schiff, who is the author of a book, or at least some chapters of the book, of the attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Lou's a good friend of the show and a good friend, period. And we're really glad to have him here today. So, Lou, how you been, my friend?
I've been good. It's so good to see you both. It's been a busy last 2 months. I became a grandfather, although I don't want to admit that I'm that old, but I became a grandfather at the end of September, which has kept my wife and I busy. And I'm just thrilled. The baby's healthy, which is the most important thing.
Yes, indeed.
Mom and dad are exhausted to the point where they said, I don't know about having a second child, which I kind of laughed. And I said, well, we'll see. That's your choice. But my wife has been helping out tremendously. She just came back from up in Orlando for the last few days visiting with them and helping out. And I mentioned that I'm going to go back up. My brother, Fred, is receiving a big award from the Florida Bandmasters Association this weekend up at Stetson University for a lifetime of work. So we're going to go up there and we'll see everybody this weekend too. So I'm real proud of my baby brother for all that he's done.
Wow. Well, it sounds like an exciting time with the Schiff family, man. Nothing like a grandbaby coming in. I mean, I told you before, we just had our first grandchild about 9 months ago, and it's a life-altering experience about how you see
8 months ahead of us, so you just tell me what's going on.
Oh, man. Well, one of the things we talked about with Lou on the show before is baseball, but the love of our different teams. And Lou, I want to talk about the book, but I also want to talk about the teams that you grew up with. I mean, you had the Mets, and then you moved to Florida, and you picked up the Marlins. It's been interesting to watch all of our teams this year. Now, obviously, Matt and I have the Tampa Bay Rays, but kind of pulling for the Jays this year, too, if this things came to an end.
Yeah. I would defer to Matt because I think that was a helter-skelter kind of year for Matt. I mean, beating the Evil Empire to go on to play the West Coast Evil Empire and being 5 out. I don't want to pour salt in the wound, but being 5 outs away. How close were you for popping the champagne, Matt?
It was a nail by inning event. It's one of those things where the nail biters are appreciated, regardless of how it goes. As a fan, you remember those. Like Rays fans will remember that Game 6 against the Dodgers, and the days that came before that. But the back and forth between the Dodgers and Blue Jays, it really felt like a tug of war between two very even caliber teams. So I appreciated it. I thought it was just fun, and I think that's what everybody kind of We talk about the state of the game a lot. To me, it's a reflection that we're heading in the right direction. Like things were interesting. Yeah.
It was a very exciting World Series, 7 games. And, in my heart of hearts, I knew the Blue Jays were going to win. I mean, all I had to do is pick up a game at home out of 2. And with that crowd, everything else to boot. But wow, the Dodgers mustered a comeback. And before the show, we were talking with Lou, and you were mentioning also about, or it may have been you, Matt, talking about Miguel Rojas. It's like, where did you come from in the game to be performing like that at the end? Somebody just shake my head for me because I couldn't do it myself. It was just, I was completely stunned.
So what were your thoughts when Dave Roberts actually decided to use him in the lineup? Like, did you expect all of that, Lou? Because as you mentioned, you've watched him play for years with Miami.
Did I expect Miguel Rojas to go deep? No. I did you expect Miguel Rojas to go deep? It's one of those kind of moments where, well, that's what I love about baseball more than any other sport. Because in basketball, you give it to Michael Jordan, all right? In football, you give it to Herschel Walker. You give it to the same person over and over and over. In baseball, when the number 9 hitter gets up, everybody holds their breath. You can't bat Judge 9 times in a game. He's coming up one, and that's what's so good about baseball. And the Dodgers put it all together.
Yeah, the whole next man up theory and then emphasis, it shows, and that's what makes some teams so much better. So you could argue, like some of the teams watching that, both on the Blue Jays side and the Dodgers, have to weigh their benches differently, especially for the playoffs. So now when they're aiming, at the trade deadline, they're going to be paying closer attention to their benches and saying, do we have the right guys like Miguel Rojas to kind of amplify that bench performance when we need it in that big moment? So, yeah.
Well, you're talking about the bench, and you talk about 9 men who are playing. I start thinking of another bench, Supreme Court. But one of the reasons we're here today is to talk with Lou about his book, Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I go back to when we had another guest on here before, and we were talking about one of the baseball cases that went to the Supreme Court, and how some of the justices were passing notes back and forth. Their clerks were bringing them in notes on what was going on with the game while they were actually trying to hear arguments on a specific case in baseball at the same time. So 9 good people out there making a decision on baseball, 9 players on the field. And how many people are you covering in your book here, Lou? Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
The attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So there are 11 attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame, starting with Kenesaw Mountain Landis, who was the first attorney enshrined in the Hall of Fame, all the way through Tampa native on your side of the state, Tony La Russa, University of South Florida grad in business, and a Florida State University law school grad. So we talk about all 11, and Tony is the only member of that elite group that is still alive. But I know you have a copy of the book. This is kind of like you tell all these great stories about them and how great they are, and the answer is, if needed to, but we don't tell the stories about somebody being great when they're not great. And I can start off with Kenesaw Mountain Landis, which is a chapter that Professor Jarvis and I co-wrote together. And by the way, we have, including Professor Jarvis and I, we have 10 law school professor and law librarians who each wrote a chapter in the book. Professor Jarvis from Nova, he edited it in such a way. He's a brilliant writer and a brilliant editor. This is the second time he and I have collaborated. So he edited it so it appears that only one person wrote the whole text. But obviously there's 10 of us that wrote it. But he did it in such a way, and he kind of, remember when you were in school, you get a rubric, and the teacher would say, this is the way we want you to write. Well, before anybody wrote their chapter, Bob sent out what really is nothing more than a rubric and go, this is how I want you to write the chapter. And so that's how we did it. And so we have these 11 chapters, and we with 1,300 footnotes. And Bob and I talk about the corruption of Kenesaw Mountain Landis, how he was a judge and a baseball commissioner at the same time. And that wouldn't hold true today. You couldn't do both. He's the reason we have a code of conduct for judges, because of what he was doing. We talk about how Kenesaw Mountain Landis became a federal judge at age 39, used the influence of his 2 brothers who were congressmen, how his influence to President Roosevelt got him the Standard Oil case against John Rockefeller. And so much of the writing in our book is not about decisions that a person might have made as a baseball commissioner or as an executive or as a manager or a player. We really talk about these folks that have been inducted in the Hall of Fame from the lens of their legal careers as attorneys. And we uncover things about them that most people never knew. So that's what we try to do. And I heard, I guess it was Ken Burns was on last week on CBS Sunday Morning talking about history and how important it is. And sometimes the history, isn't the history that's really true. And as researchers, like you guys are, we're always looking to find out new things and discover new things about people through the lens of history and compare it to today. And so what we try to do in Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame is to tell the stories of these 13 men, and you can read it in any order. We have the chapters in the order that they were enshrined, but you can read about them in any order you want to find out what their legal contributions have been to America, what they've done, good or bad, from their legal standing, how they use their law degree. William Shea famously brought baseball back to New York, and he says of Walter O'Malley, who is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, that Walter O'Malley, and this is not my words, this is William Shea's words, and it's in the book, that William Shea was such a poor lawyer, he wouldn't have wanted him to even fight a traffic ticket for him. That's William Shea. In the Bowie Kuhn chapter, we discuss, when I say we, the authors discuss, Elizabeth Manriquez wrote that chapter and concludes her chapter by saying that basically Bowie Kuhn, in all the decisions he ever made as a commissioner, never was on the right side of making a decision. But then we talk about Branch Rickey, and Branch Rickey truly belong. If there's a Mount Rushmore of greats in the Hall of Fame, Branch Rickey, I think we mentioned this on a previous podcast when we were getting ready to publish the book, Branch Rickey would be somebody that you'd want to put up there because he was truly a gentleman who was fighting for equality of all men, regardless of the color of their skin. And so he's in the Hall of Fame for his efforts in his lifetime. We talk about John Montgomery Ward, who made it into the Baseball Hall of Fame as a ball player, but he also was the person that was the first person to unionize baseball through the Baseball Players League. And Walter Champion, who wrote his chapter, and he's a professor of law from Texas, he concludes, and not that his conclusion, but he points out how John Montgomery Ward, for all the good he did, was not a very popular man, that people didn't like him, that he was arrogant and rude. And in spite of all his accomplishments, people just didn't like him. Later in life, he became a very competitive golfer. And so we talk about things that you might not know about these members of the Hall of Fame because it's not on their plaque. You probably don't know this about Tony La Russa, but I uncovered it while I was doing the chapter. I wrote about it. So when Tony La Russa was in law school, his professor, one of his dear professors, a gentleman by the name of Charles Earhart. Charles Earhart's still alive today. Charles Earhart became a mentor to Tony, and the advice that he gave Tony was, no matter what you do, you make sure you take the bar exam and you pass it. You do this because you have to have a fallback position.
Right.
Tony stuck around a little bit extra in baseball so he could pay for his law degree at Florida State. Every law school in the state of Florida at the time he went to law school accepted him. But the reason why he went to Florida State was because Florida State was the only one of the law schools that said, we'll turn a blind eye, so to speak, and let you only go to school when it's not baseball season. They even let him take his exams early. Now, under today's ABA standards, one might say you're cutting the line close. But they allowed him to do this. This was the 1970s, and they allowed him to do it. He graduated towards the very top of his class, and had he practiced law, he probably would have been a very fine litigator. I spoke to one of his classmates, but to go back to Charles Earhart, it was Charles Earhart, the mentor, that said, you need to finish your law degree. You need to do this. This is something you're always going to have as a fallback position. Well, go ahead now to the 1980s, early 1990s in Oakland. There's a young man by the name of Robin Fusion. And maybe you know the name because he's a circuit judge on your side of the state. And Robin was a struggling pitcher who also graduated the University of South Florida and had the fortune of being on the A's coaching staff in the minor leagues. And during spring training, he approached Tony. And Tony at that time obviously was a member of the Florida Bar. And he had a similar conversation with Tony. And Tony said to him, you need to go to law school. You need to go to law school if you're considering it, because you're not going to always have baseball and you have to have something to land on. And so Robin goes to law school, and now he's a circuit judge over in Hillsborough County. And he attributes the fact that he became a circuit judge to just a small conversation that he had with Tony, and Tony mentoring him and telling him how important it was to go to law school. That's not on Tony La Russa's Hall of Fame plaque. That's not there. So we try to talk about the things that aren't on their plaques that maybe make them Hall of Famers or maybe make them Hall of Shamers. But this is the kind of things that we try to talk about. So you learn a little bit. And the essays are about 15 pages each. The book is only 250 pages, which includes the footnotes. And they're very easy reads. You don't have to be a lawyer, you know, to like this book, a baseball fan, lawyer, law student, whatever. It's a fun read. And what we also did in it, we have pictures of each of the inductees, but they're wearing their uniforms. They're wearing their legal uniforms. Everybody is pictured dressed as an attorney. We don't have them dressed in their baseball attire.
I think what's interesting is like when you think about baseball as a fan, right? Anybody that wants to be a well-rounded baseball knowledge person, I think you kind of overlook a lot of these things that you're talking about, a lot of the people who influenced certain parts of the game in a very, very critical and important way. And like you said, there's lessons learned, there's good things, bad things, but it all, like the awareness of it all is important as a fan to kind of dive into once in a while, because it makes you so much more educated and it makes you less panicky about things when they happen. Like we see a lot of changes in the game now. We see a lot of things that are going on, and you can kind of jump off a bridge because of this reason, jump off a bridge because of that reason, say this person's doing crazy things, this person's not doing crazy things. But all in all, if you have this kind of background knowledge, you kind of see that, you know, all in all, it usually comes out to an interesting story that you can tell to anybody that you're talking to after the fact at a game, especially.
You can understand. Well, let's look at what's going on right now in Cleveland.
Mm.
So you have two Guardian players that have allegedly committed crimes by getting involved with alleged gamblers, by allegedly misfiring a pitch on purpose. And I read that one of the ball players had like a $20 million guarantee. Now, if this is true, this person is looking at, I read, going to federal prison for several decades. But remember, folks are innocent until proven guilty. Now, if we look at this in the lens of Kenesaw Mountain Landis, after the Black Sox, and remember, Kenesaw Mountain Landis, look at baseball. It's been 100 years since Kenesaw Mountain Landis was commissioner. A little bit more than 100 years, 1922, 1921. He gets the position as commissioner because of some of the rulings he made as a judge. Some of them were good, some of them may not have been good, but he gets the position and he says, I'm going to be a czar. And the 3-man National Commission is disbanded because gambling is at an epidemic and the sport is in question. The integrity of the game is floundering, and people are saying, look, if this is the way baseball is, then we shouldn't have it. So when the Black Sox, the White Sox, are acquitted, found not guilty, the very first thing that Kenesaw Mountain Landis does is that he bans these players for life. They'll never be able to be involved in baseball ever again. Fast forward to where we are today. The baseball commissioner, the players, they're not banned right now, but they're kind of on unpaid leave. And I'm sure they're going to wait to see the outcome of the case. And then if we go back 3 months, whether you like it or not, the president of the United States has put pressure on the baseball commissioner, and I believe he put pressure on him, to open up the Hall of Fame to some people that had been excluded up till this point.
Yeah.
So gambling has changed baseball. There used to be signs up at ballparks, and you remember seeing them, Mark and Matt, that no gambling. And now, during the World Series, what do we see live from Toronto on the outfield walls? There's an ad for DraftKings. So is anyone surprised that in 2025 that there are 2 ball players that are alleged to have been involved in some sort of, I can't say it's throwing of a game because they didn't say they threw the game, but they're alleged to be doing things to the benefit of gamblers during a game and knowing the outcome? Is anybody surprised that that's happening?
Not here.
Had conversations about it over and over again, saying it was coming. Like we predicted that, and it's only going to get worse. I don't think it'll be the last. It's a little bit like steroids. Even though we knew that people were getting punished for it, people still did it. Even Shohei Ohtani, I would go back to Shohei Ohtani. I think somebody fell on their sword in that case to prevent things from coming out in a certain way and harm the game irreparably for generations. So the impact of these things is very interesting, but you could also argue the game has also been changed, from lawyers, in the fact that players are represented by lawyers now. They have agents a lot of times that are either part of an agency that has access to lawyers and instructs players or gives them advice, on the law's point of view. They have MLBPA who also employ lawyers. They have, I don't know, maybe a dozen lawyers that work for the MLBPA, depending on how close they are to the CBA. You're surrounded by people who are willing to give you advice and are supposed to be helping you and impacting the game in a positive way, or keeping you in between those two lines. But as we see, there's always interesting stories that come about despite all that.
It's interesting you talk about the players. The original Marvin Miller was not the first. Marvin Miller is not an attorney, and he's now in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But someone said, "Oh, well, you forgot Marvin Miller." No, I didn't forget him. He wasn't an attorney. He was a labor union executive in Detroit in the automobile industry. Major League Baseball, we talk about Major League Baseball like it's this big fuzzy thing. Every year, Major League Baseball talks about Jackie Robinson Day, and they do all these things. But Major League Baseball, for a long time, just wouldn't allow the mention of Jackie Robinson Day because it wasn't in their best interest. And so they sometimes hide things. So when I talk about Major League Baseball, I'm not from the commissioner's office. I'm talking about the organization, Major League Baseball. So when the players were first unionized, and this is after John Montgomery Ward tried to unionize them with the Players League in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the owners themselves basically handpicked a judge by the name of Robert Cannon from Texas to be the players union executive. Well, players revolted pretty quickly, and the next thing you know, Marvin Miller becomes the agent in charge and brings them to where they are today. And so, yes, there are a lot of lawyers that work for the Major League Baseball Players Association, but there's probably more lawyers that work for Major League Baseball, the organization.
What are your thoughts on the newest version, like the newest obstacle? You're talking about the players union, but now the minor league players are also a part of that. And one of the people that's getting a lot of praise and is seen as the person who got them, I think it's 34 of the 72 votes in MLBPA actually belong to minor leaguers now, which is going to impact the CBA. But Harry Marino was the lawyer that is, in charge of that movement. And now he's part of MLBPA, and people are saying that they want him to have a bigger role in MLBPA because they really like the way he progressed things from for the minor league players as part of the MLBPA now.
Well, so as a historian, Matt, you're aware that minor leaguers were working for less than minimum wage, and so there was lawsuits filed regarding that. If you take a look at the history of Major League Baseball settles most, if not all, of their lawsuits eventually. They do, and this fight to unionize the minor leagues was a long fight. But what did baseball do? In the middle of this fight, baseball says we're going to get rid of 25. We're going to get rid of 25% of the teams, and they were allowed to do it because of the way the contracts were. So they get rid of 25% of the teams. So now, and then they go, and here's how. Well, let's see, we'll get rid of 25% of the teams, and we're only going to have the draft a certain amount of rounds. We don't need 70 rounds in the draft. So they limit now the number of ball players that are under minor league rule, and so again, this is an organization, and don't kid you, there's a great book by, and I think you've already interviewed him, and if you haven't, you really should, Craig Calcaterra. Reinventing Fandom. It's a book he wrote about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's worth re-exploring with Craig. He calls it the industrial complex. But don't kid yourself. The role of a Major League Baseball team to make their fans happy is to make money for the owners, or that's what their role is. And us being from small market teams, Tampa, Miami, Toronto, being from a small market team, we've got to win with smoke and mirrors. There's no Juan Soto contracts coming into the Marlins. And Sandy, instead of talking about how much they're going to pay Sandy to pitch, the conversation now is, what can they get for Sandy so that I don't have to pay him?
I've been talking about bringing him to Toronto.
If you could pay him to go to Toronto, that's good. I wish you well. I think he's a great guy. I would hope the Marlins would keep him. The nice thing about this past baseball season, from a Marlins fan standpoint, was that they didn't trade anybody. They didn't trade any of their pitchers, which said to me as a fan, that's really good. They're trying to win with the players they have. And I enjoyed it because they made it close down the home stretch. But for getting swept by the Rockies, they could have been there themselves.
Yeah, you had, I think, as somebody that monitors, most teams, I try to pay attention and get a feel for where they stand overall as an organization. I think the biggest key for you guys is you actually got some core position players established this year. So you got Kyle Stowers and Augusta Ramirez, which I think are two really great people you can build around. Now you can attract more talent. You can kind of start to build, because the pitching, like you say, is there. Yeah. And not only do they have that top layer, they have 2 layers below that are very intriguing pitching prospects.
Then they just let Troy Johnston just go away. That was like, why? I don't understand. I don't, because they weren't paying him anything compared to everybody else. They didn't protect him, and I think he went to did he go to the Rockies? I think the Rockies got him. I think the Rockies got him, and the Marlins play the Rockies the first series of the season, and you know what that means? He's going to come back and haunt the Marlins.
This is the way.
How's the building going over on your side, Mark? I saw some pictures. You're going to be ready for opening day?
They are indeed. I had the good fortune of meeting Ken Babby and some of the other ones a while back, and they were talking about they're getting up there one panel at a time. Opening day, that's the target, to have that puppy open, and we're all very excited about it here. It's people who are race fans live as skeptics these days. I actually probably have for over a decade or so, about where they're going to be playing. But it looks like the Trop for a few years, and then hopefully new owners will have found some land. I think maybe they have, and we'll look for a new one.
So I have to say, because I'm a Rays insider, they came out with their first sort of marketing effort, right? As the new organization, Mark and I were talking about how they're changing things up, and we think they'll have a different focus with the new group than they did with Stu Sternberg at the helm. But they're already selling tickets for the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they're selling the tickets and they're saying, okay, well now they're single tickets, and it's interesting how they seem to be pointing at, because I don't remember the Rays ever freeing those up this early in terms of single seat tickets. So I think they're trying to fill the entire Trop for the first time in a long time. That's the feeling. The initial feeling I get from that email they sent it.
The Marlins sent me an email today saying that single game tickets for season ticket holders went on sale this morning at 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So I went online to see kind of who they're playing, to see if I wanted to pick up extra tickets. And I looked at the schedule, and it's like, the Yankees aren't in this year. And then I looked to see what seats were available. And I see that they're still holding back some of the good seats, hoping that they'll sell those seats as part of season ticket packages or partial season ticket packages. So there's no real incentive to buy some seats right now, because the real good seats, they're still holding back the real good seats.
Right. So I took a deep dive at your budget in Miami as well. And 17 million that Sandy is owed. If you take that away, right, and they do trade him somehow, and they decide to go with another starter in his spot, the highest paid player will make under $4 million, and the
And
entire
who's that?
the Edward Cabrera, yeah, and that's his arbitration goes a certain way. They could extend him. I don't know, but there's there's a case to be made if you're an MLB team and the gambling money we were just talking about, just that in itself probably covers the 37 million that would be on the 40-man roster for the Marlins once Sandy leaves. 37 million is what the Dodgers call one starter.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Right? And that's your 40-man roster. So
and that explains, and again, it's not always money that wins. It's not always the team that pays the most that wins, as evident with the Mets, but it certainly enhances your chances when you are playing with ball players and you try to develop and put on your team a couple of extra ball players. And now we're at the end of next year, we'll be looking at whether or not there'll be a strike. Will there be a strike? Well, what's going to happen? And then just from the standpoint of again, the organization itself, the fans will run away again. Should Major League Baseball and the Players Union decide that they are not going to meet, it'll do harm to the fans that are on the outside. Yeah, they should learn that this year's World Series, there were 35 million people that will watch Game 7. That's incredible numbers. That's more people than watch Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And I know I heard from basketball friends of mine. Well, you have to understand it was Indiana and Oklahoma City. That's why there was. Well, no, it was still a Game 7, and yes, it was LA, and yes, it was Canada, but still, I mean, basketball is supposed to be that big engine that's overtaken baseball, and they didn't even come close to baseball's numbers.
In the midst of all this, though, and Matt, we've talked about this. In the midst of all this, we've seen the growth of the game, of the excitement. There's more youth in it. The game has been shortened, and this is absolutely the time to put the brakes on that with potentially a lockout. And I cannot imagine 30 owners looking at that program and saying, yeah, let's go ahead and put our feet down and shut out a season, because I don't want to see that nail in the coffin. And Matt, we've talked about this before. I've got a friend who in 1995, after that, he swore off baseball, watching it all together. And to this day, he has not come back. I can't imagine how many more people we will lose after seeing that great growth of all of the audience that we've seen with just what you say with the World Series.
Right.
So if you were the MLBPA, if you were part of that team that's representing them, I've talked to Mark about this, about opening up the books, right? And on MLB standpoint, and splitting it 50-50, because a lot of the leagues seem to be aiming that way. They seem to be running, the players get 50%, they split it up however they do with salary caps. The owners get 50%, but the books are open, supposedly, for some sort of measure.
Sure they were. Yeah.
How would you do that? How would you do that in Major League Baseball? And would it ever happen on the owner's standpoint? Because without that, I don't think you can argue for a salary cap.
I'm not a big fan of salary caps. I think there should be some sort of, and there's supposed to be a salary minimum, but the Marlins have been accused of not even living up to that standard. I don't think someone should be penalized. The teams are penalized in the sense they get taxed, but I don't think there should be a limit. If you were a business, if you and Matt, Mark, are competing and you're selling something and you're on different sides of the town and you have good employees, you don't want to be told you can only pay somebody a certain amount. You may want to pay a little bit more to maybe even entice some of Matt's people to come work for you when their contract is over. I think the competition is healthy. But then I might be in the minority. I think competition is good. But I would like to see owners open up their purse a little bit and take out some, because it doesn't seem like any of them are crying to the bank.
No.
So I watch a lot of hockey. I watch a lot of sports where their salary cap is. What I see is that the stars are able to stay on their original team. And that's what I want. That's what we lose with no salary cap. Everybody knows right now in free agency, the Dodgers get whoever they want. It doesn't matter. You can put the same money from every team on the table. They're going to the Dodgers, or they're going to the Mets or the Yankees. Bo Bichette.
The Dodgers can only put 26 people on their roster.
But why are the 27 other teams part of the league? Like at that point, like it's just nonsense. I don't agree with the whole all the stars need to gravitate to the major media places. I want Ellie De La Cruz to stay in Cincinnati his whole career. I want him to be that staple guy who anchors. The kids can really, gravitate to him, say, that's our guy. Evan Longoria.
What does Ellie De La Cruz want? That's the thing. What does he want as a ball player? Does he want to stay in Cincinnati his whole career? Or does he want, we don't have right now, well, we do with the Latin American players, pretty much, they can be signed by anybody. But when we're talking about the American players, United States and Canadian players, when they get drafted, if you grew up a Toronto fan and you get drafted by Oakland, do you want to stay with Oakland your whole career? You may want to go back and play in Toronto.
But I don't want it to be a financial decision. Like, I'll give you an example. Steve Stamkos just left Tampa recently, right? He didn't leave that because the Lightning couldn't pay him anymore. He left there because, like you said, it was his decision. But it was under a salary cap system. He still got to go to where he wanted to go, and everything was fine. What I'm saying is that the position of the team shouldn't be, we want to keep him, the player wants to stay, but we can't pay him what he's worth because of the system that's in place. That's what's happening right now.
They can pay him. They just refuse to. Okay. So the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees are perfect examples that we're going to pay what we think we can pay to keep the ball player. And once we think that ball player is no longer, when the ball player's expectations are higher than what we think their ability is, then we'll let you go play for someone else.
But here's the difference. If I would, let's say, for argument's sake, Ellie De La Cruz is able to get $38 million a year from the Reds. Okay. Right. How much of their income is that as compared to the Dodgers? It might be 2% of the Dodgers' income. It might be 40% of the Reds' income. The decisions are completely different. It's not even relatable because to the Dodgers, he's just another guy. They can DFA him. It won't hurt them. Well, but for the Reds, it's a lifetime decision. Right?
What if we take all that penalty money for the Dodgers and then we say you infuse that to the other small market teams and you help build up their base? Because we know they're all broke anyway, right? No. But I'm saying that money has to be going somewhere to grow the game. And yes, let's face it, small markets can ride the back of the big teams because of what they're going to get on TV rights, what they're going to get on anything that's sold online as far as merch, all of that, because smallest little team's going to get everything that's sold from Yankees and Dodgers online. That smallest team on number 30 is going to get money from them with, I believe, an equal share as at 1/30th of it. So money's there.
Right. Why did Sternberg sell the team for $2 billion?
$1.7 billion.
$1.7 billion. Okay. I can't even fathom $1.7 billion. Now they're going to expand baseball in a couple of years, and I'm hearing that the ante money for expansion is going to be about $2 billion a team just to buy in before you have to do anything else. And that's why I don't see a need for salary caps. Don't come crying to me. You know what would make baseball go great? This is what would make baseball owners start to pay. If your team finishes in the last two spots,
you're relegated.
You're relegated. You're done. And you have another owner in waiting in the minor leagues. The problem is the owner in the minor leagues is the owner in the major leagues. But if there's some way you take a team and you relegate them, you say, you know what, White Sox, you were so bad this year. We're going to play with 29 teams. All right. And that's how it's going to be. So maybe you do have 32 teams and only the top 30 compete. And then when those two teams fall apart, you take the other two teams and you bump them up, and then you figure out a way. But if you're a major league team and you know that your team is so bad that it's going to be relegated to be playing in a different division. I don't know. Maybe it's more competitive that way. I don't have an answer.
It would be genius, and I'm on the same page. I sold this idea to Mark a few weeks ago or a few months ago because it would elevate the minor leagues as well. Because all those AAA teams would have to build up their stadiums, would have to build up the infrastructure, and get knowledgeable fans involved because they want to fill their stadiums to make it to that next level, to be able to buy the right players, et cetera.
You'd have to have well, there are different owners, but they would have to be affiliated differently. So, for example, the St. Paul Saints are not owned by the Minnesota Twins. They're owned by what's the name of that group? The Diamond Corporation Group has bought a whole bunch of teams. So yeah, Diamond would be competing, and they would say, hey, we'd love to take our St. Paul Saints if they're the best team in AAA. And all of a sudden, the Minnesota Twins, they have a really bad season. Now all of a sudden, they're the AAA team of the St. Paul Saints. That would just be wild.
Here's an idea. You have expansion talk, right? And you get 6 teams to build stadiums and build teams, right? And then they have a small season within themselves to earn the right to be the 31st and 32nd team.
Who's going to pay for the stadiums?
I don't know.
Oh,
But then you have the setting for the league so that when they do get promoted and you put that system in where there's relegation and promotion, they're ready. They're already there. Whereas right now with AAA, how many teams could really do that? Maybe 4 or 5.
I don't even know if there's that many. No.
It would be like what the Rays did with Steinbrenner Field. It would be similar to that in terms of numbers. So that's tough to pull off.
I do like the whole idea, though, the bottom 2 being relegated and saying, guys, you had the opportunity, you didn't
play hockey. If you're ahead, you're now a hockey team. Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I have to ask you about the book again. And
okay,
you're talking. We were talking simply about Robin Fuson, who's become a judge as well. I sometimes think baseball almost entertains a legal mind in the sense of there's rules that are involved. There's judgments that are constantly being made on the field. Decisions are being made about the value of a player or a manager. So it seems like there's a lot of judgment going on, a lot of things with that. And then you look at the number of attorneys. I mean, once upon a time, you wouldn't necessarily think that a representative of a player would have to be an attorney, but I think it's almost, you have to be when you look at all the different elements that are involved in looking at that player's career and potential. So is baseball just basically an attorney-friendly factory, if you will, or is there it has an appeal, I should say, to attorneys?
There's a lot of rules in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And attorneys are rule kind of people that we want to know what to expect. And that's in any area of life. That's where, attorneys come in. I think, and then it's a business. So baseball it's not the game that we played when we were 12 years old. This is a game that people's livelihoods are at stake, and people come to watch other people play. And there are thousands of jobs that are at stake with a baseball team, from the person that motions you into the parking lot to the security, to the police that secure the stadium, to the folks that clean the stadium. There's just thousands of, I've jokingly said that there's more people in the ballpark who work for the team than there are fans at a Marlins game sometimes. There's a lot of mouths to feed. And so there's going to be a lot of lawyers involved. There are different unions. Players are making more money than ever before. If you read the cases that when John Montgomery Ward was first trying to start the initial players union, courts used to rule that the reserve clause was a good rule because if a player didn't like what they were earning, they could go back on the farm and make more than they can go back to being a farmer and make more than a ball player. Well, we know that was kind of true up until the 1960s, where ball players were driving beer trucks in the wintertime. I remember there was a substitute teacher at my junior high school in New York that was a pitcher for the Mets at one point. So he would be a substitute teacher in the winter and be a ball player in the summer. Now players are expected to stay in good shape all year long, and you need lawyers. There's a case going on right now that's going up to the United States Supreme Court that's out of Puerto Rico, dealing with a malpractice issue and some rules and laws on workers' compensation. And so it's a complicated off the field game on many, many levels. If you build a stadium, there's going to be lawsuits involved in the building of the stadium.
Oh, yeah.
But that's life, it's just the way it is. I have said this before and I'll say it again. I truly believe you could probably teach an entire first year of law school on nothing but baseball law classes, because they cover everything, torts and contracts and real estate, and there's family law and there's estate law, and there's all kinds of issues, civil procedure issues that you can learn from various baseball cases. But that's all sports. But I don't know much about the legality, or know very little to next to nothing about the legal cases besides the Roselli case and professional football that contrasts with the federal baseball case. But baseball has been America's pastime, so to speak. And you brought it up when we started. The Supreme Court has had a love for baseball. Many of the men who were on the Supreme Court in the early 1900s to the mid 1900s were ball players. Wizard White, there were a lot of ball players that were sat on the court. They loved the game, so they analogized some of their decisions to being a ball player. Chief Justice Roberts, when he interviewed for his position with the Senate, said that he's an umpire and all he's going to do is call balls and strikes. It's a way of looking at things.
Let me ask you, since you've taken the robe off, do you feel more free to speak your mind about what you see going on, whether baseball or teams? You feel freer to speak about cases?
There's not much. I've always spoken about baseball cases. That I've always kind of felt free to do. I'm a retired judge, so I enjoy having had the robe off now for almost a year. It's been enjoyable. I just wish that as an American society, and when I say American, I mean North America, in that we would all get along a little bit better. Amen. But that was part of that. That's what my job was as a judge, that it didn't matter what someone's race, religion, nationality was. My job was to rule in accordance with the facts and the law. And I just wish that people would be kinder to one another and listen more. And quit the name calling. We hear it on all. Stop calling people names. Do you have to call people names? Can't we make decisions based upon what's best for everybody? Just quit calling. That's what the judiciary does. The third branch of government is the one that calls balls and strikes. You don't have to be a showman to call balls and strikes. You just call it. Yeah. And when you leave at the end of the day, one of my good friends, David Denkin, who's a retired judge on your side of the state, also, Mark, he just retired as a Sarasota County Court judge after 25 years as a judge. Wow. He used to say this. We used to teach together a lot. People will long remember how you made them feel than the decision that you made. And I think we need to start doing more of that as just people. And if we do that, I think I have so many friends that I don't necessarily agree with, but they're my friends. And we sometimes just agree not to talk about things we don't agree with. Smart. Because that's the way it is. We live in great countries. These are two of the greatest countries on earth. And we need to get along because we have so many things in common. Extol the things that are good about people and don't dwell on the things that you don't like about somebody.
I think we have everything to lose from all the fighting that's going on or the bickering, and we have nothing to gain from it. So I don't understand why it's even, I get at some point people want to change things around. They want to make, some sort of evolution in some way, shape, or form. But you're right. And the question that often comes up is who teaches that to people in general, and what are their sources of information, and where do they get their facts from? So I think one of the, and I've talked about this with Craig Calcaterra, was that we need to find a way to get people to trust facts again. And in the age of AI and the media the way it is, I don't know how we do that. There's so much manipulation going on behind, the scenes.
I don't know how we do it either. Judges have been fooled. Lawyers have gotten caught submitting briefs with AI, the cases that don't exist, the hostility. I was quoted in a newspaper article, I guess this past March, about the lack of civility in court since the pandemic. Lawyers, and I think this is just people in general, people don't do, and maybe now this was me showing my 70 years of age. Okay. People don't write handwritten thank you notes. People don't go to coffee with somebody they may disagree with before a hearing. If you break bread with somebody, you'll learn something about that person that you'll realize you have in common. But too often we get this flat screen and lawyers come on and they want to argue their case. And I wanted to see the lawyers tell me something about the other lawyer. What do you mean, Judge? Well, no. What do you know about the other? Do you even know where they went to law school? What do you know about them? And again, this is maybe me being just the old guy. You would sit outside a hearing room and being a news reporter, you would be in the same press box with somebody, and you might be, maybe you're competitors and you're competing for the same readership. But if you're sitting next to somebody in a press box, you'll find out they're a really good person. They're not trying to beat you over the head. Maybe you'll share an idea that'll give them an idea, and you'll get an idea on writing a story. There's nothing wrong with sharing of ideas and learning about the person that you're with. Not everybody's out to get you.
All right. Well, on that note, I have a couple of ideas for you.
Yeah.
Now you've got this great book, right? You've got, it's out there. It's a living, breathing thing, and that must feel like a great accomplishment.
It's been fun. It got to #1 on Amazon a couple of times. The American Bar Association did a wonderful review of the book a week or two ago, and it's just been if it hasn't been #1, it's been in the top 5 or 6 for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I guess it's selling 3 copies a day instead of no copies a day. But it's been a lot of fun, so I've been able to take some of my retirement time, because if I was a full-time judge, I couldn't in the middle of the afternoon be making phone calls or sending out emails. I was doing something else.
So my idea was, how do you expand on it? Because eventually Scott Boras is going to make it into the Hall of Fame.
Oh.
So you're going to have...
there's never been a player agent. The closest player agent to the Hall of Fame is Marvin Miller. And he was employed by the Major League Baseball Players Association. Does Scott Boras get into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Boy, I could give you probably not before Manfred.
The players get to vote, right? So at some point, it's like...
Well, no, there's that era. There's the era of folks that get to vote, and the Ford Frick wing has the broadcasters, and there's an attorney broadcaster in there. That's Mel Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Many folks don't realize that Mel Allen, University of Alabama, sometime in the 1930s, his name was Melvin Israel. So folks might not be aware of that, but he was a University of Alabama law grad. But some names that come to mind, or maybe Epstein, certainly Manfred. But I don't think we'll ever see another baseball player.
What about William Clarence Matthews? William Clarence Matthews. So recently, Major League Baseball brought in the Negro League stats, right? They've started to open the door in a lot of different areas. And they've started to look back at some of the players from different generations that had an impact on the game. He's one of those names that I could see potentially being added, right? They could be an
but contemporary players. So there's no contemporary players.
Yeah.
That are attorneys. Don Clendenin comes to mind, but he played for the Mets in the 60s and the Pirates in the 60s and then into the 70s and then became an attorney. But ball players now, one of the reasons ball players were lawyers or even doctors or whatever, because they had to make more money during the off season. Now, maybe Matt, you or Mark, you must know it. What's the minimum baseball salary? $750, $800?
$775, I think, is the latest one.
Nice work if you can get it. If you're
Oh,
making
yeah.
$775,000 a year, is there a need to go to law school?
I don't know. The government gets half, Lou. That's not much.
Well, if you're working in the state of Florida, there's no Florida income
That's
tax, so
right.
there's a little bit more for your pocket.
There you go.
I wonder, though, sometimes going back to the CBA, I'm thinking if I was one of those players who was in the midst of negotiating back and forth with MLB, would I get enough of the bug to say, when my career is over, I'd like to have my say in here. I'd like to be able to say something more about that. And that's when I go back to saying earlier that there's something about baseball. It's about deciding things. There's arguments involved. There's points of view. And I think I could see maybe those elements bringing a player to the game, but I understand what you're saying, Lou. Why they got enough
3
money.
to 5. In order to become an attorney, it's a 3 to 5 year process.
Yeah.
Tony La Russa's case, it was 5 years because they allowed him to do, it was the quarter system. So they allowed him to do 2 quarters a year for 5 years, and he got his work in. The ABA standard now is that you have to complete your studies within 5 years. There are ways of doing it online, but still it would take you 5 years to do it. So I'm not saying that a ball player couldn't go to law school. There was a woman, and her last name, Bianca Smith, and she was in the Red Sox organization as a coach. She's an attorney, and now I think she's coaching in Japan. But there aren't a lot of, I don't know of any current baseball player is an attorney or in law school.
It would be interesting because I took a look at the numbers before we came on today, and there's 130 lawyers working for Major League Baseball in some way, shape, or form overall. When you're looking at every team,
employed by Major League MLB, employed by Major League Baseball,
Major League Baseball, and every team, right? Because every team has somewhere between 4 and 10 10 lawyers, and then Major League Baseball has their lawyers, etc. So when you're looking at that as a whole, and you know that a lot of agencies out there or agents are lawyers as well, or it would help them be better agents if they had that kind of background as well. So if you're a minor league player and you want to stick around in baseball, or even if you want to become a GM one day, if you want to be whatever, like having that knowledge of how everything works, to me, enhances your ability. Like I think of a lot of the smart players that I see are teams adopt players that come from Ivy League universities, and they're really well instructed. And if you're a lawyer, you're going to be thought of in that same way. So I think there's a lot to kind of explore there in terms of guiding people when they're coming into university and they are playing minor league ball. Hey, swing for the fences, not only on the field, but also in the program that you choose. An arts degree isn't going to get you much in terms of employment when you leave baseball. But if you happen to be able to work towards a law degree.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my sales pitch.
Well, I tell you what, I can't thank you enough, Lou, for visiting with us here again today, my friend. And it's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. There's this book you've got out now again, Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I love it. You and Robert Jarvis put this together as far as editing. And there's some great stories in here. As you mentioned, probably no more than 15 to 20 pages on anyone. But I got to say, too, I actually did love all the footnotes because I was really curious, wanting to know more about where that fact came from, et cetera.
That's all backed up. It was a fun project. If folks are interested, McFarland, who's our publisher, is now giving a 25% discount on the book between now and the end of November. And so you go to McFarland, I guess it's .com, and the code is my last name, Schiff, SCHIFF, then the number 25. And during checkout, you'll get the book for 25% off the price. So if you're interested, if you're not interested, that's okay. It was a fun project to do. It took us, I think I started talking to you about this 3 or 4 years ago. It took us about 4 years altogether to when it started. We had a different name for the book in the beginning, and then we went back and forth with the publisher, and then we finally settled on this name. And McFarland is known in baseball circles as publishing really good baseball works. So it's been a fun project, and I've worked with some really great folks.
So do you have a plan in place for what's next? Are you tinkering with any kind of ideas on things?
So we were talking. Yeah, I am. The next book, if there is a next book, is going to be, and I discussed it with Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, which is where I went to school and where I teach. I want to do and I was going to do a course in January, but I'm not ready to do it yet because I don't have everything the way I want. But it's really on civility, and it's on civility to lawyers and trying to teach law students how to communicate in a positive way that'll make a difference for themselves and their clients. And I've talked to one publisher who's very interested and kind of said, we'd really be interested to publish a book like this because there isn't one out there exactly the way you're describing it. I want to do it. And if I was 20 years younger, I would already be in the middle of the project. But Mark understands. Mark's 8 months ahead of me in my road as being a grandfather. So here's how my son's an attorney, and he calls me tonight before we were doing the show. And he says to me, when Emmett's ready to play Little League, you're going to come up here and be my assistant coach. I said, no, I'm going to be the coach. You can be my assistant coach. So, I mean, there's so much to do that I want to spend. I want to spend more time with the family. Yeah. My wife and I have done a lot of traveling. I'm working on my golf game a little bit. I want to do that. So I do want to do it, and I'm doing a program for the National Judicial College in March on spring training for judges, and we're going to do it out in Phoenix during spring training, the first week of March. And some of the things we're going to talk about, we'll talk a little bit of baseball law, LAW, as opposed to LORE, and we may put some LORE, but we're also going to emphasize courtroom demeanor, courtroom control, civility, things like that, kind of like spring training, for folks, just how to navigate through a real crazy world that we live in and do it in such a way that when the people leave the courtroom, to quote my good friend David Denkin, that they long remember how you made them feel as opposed to what decision you made. And if that's the way we can do it as judges, then we've done our job. A lot of times you don't want to remember the name of the judge you appeared in front of necessarily. The same way you really don't care who the umpire was or the referee was. You just want to know that they were there, they did their job, and then we all went home.
Exactly. No, that's great. And my grandfather always used to tell me the greatest job in the world is being a grandfather. So I'm going to
find that out. Mark's got that thumbs up. I'm going to find that out pretty soon.
Oh yeah, it is the richest thing in my life. Is that beautiful little 9-month-old girl. I mean, it's 9-month-old girl. She has captured my heart every moment.
There you go.
So you're going to love every moment of it too, Blue. We'll have to share notes as we go along.
Absolutely, Mark. Absolutely.
So, and Matt, thanks again for being here as always, and Lou for joining Matt and I at this.
My pleasure. You guys, so much fun to sit and talk with you. It's just like we'll pick it up the next time. It's a great conversation, and then be safe, guys. And thanks for having me again.
You too. You too. Well, thank you all again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck, and we hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk to you again real soon.
You have been listening to Baseball Biz on Deck. Just a reminder, if you enjoyed this show, go ahead, like, and subscribe to Baseball Biz on Deck. Also, you can find Matt at matgermain.b/skysocial. That's Matt at matgermain.b/skysocial, or Mark at baseballbizondeck.b/skysocial. You may also find Baseball Biz on Deck at iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at baseballbizondeck.com. Special thanks to XTakeRUX for the music, Rocking Forward.
All rise.